Hello, I'm Mark here with Celestial Divide, checking out an Executor report and how to read and understand it. We're taking a look at estate prep today. First round, the extra value added is really just a ratio here. You'll see it explained here in the value range. This is coming from the minimum, which is if we sold all the assets in this estate, paid off the debts, and this is what we would receive as a net basis. So that is taking the effective sales price for each one of those assets, pretty much the lowest value that we can get out of each one, and adding them all up. The maximum is going to be if we could give each asset to the highest bidder. That is going to be the maximum that we can get out of this estate. And then the actual here is coming back and saying, this is what we were able to achieve by dividing things up. We now have a range where we take the maximum minus the minimum, and you'll see this is the potential for value that we could add, and we have a captured figure, in this case 2.4 million, or 99% of the available range that we could have captured. This is just a quick check. Inheritance constraints were all fulfilled. So as we scroll down here to the valuation matrix, we'll be able to get a good understanding that we have no jealousy, or at least it's within the disparity tolerance that we have set. That is a possibility that you allow for it if you expect people are willing to work together or putting in values that are rounded as opposed to thought out. We read these from left to beneficiary one is going to value each person's values at this much respectively. Again, this is a value per percent. So if you took their 33.33% that they've been allocated and divided it by 33.33, you would get the value they see for 1%, and they get that much value out of what they've received. Conversely, what they see over here is what they've received per 1%. So the purpose for this standardization, as opposed to just telling you exactly what they see, is of course, if we didn't have equal shares, say we did 30, 30, 40, then we would still want this standardized so that we could understand that they are happy with the amount they've received and not anybody else's amounts. The next, you could look at the middle child here and see that they think the youngest has done poorly, they're doing fantastic, and the eldest is doing okay. And you can see the same thing from the third beneficiary as well. Hopefully that answers that. The estate view, this is their view, so we're going to take their bids along with any minimum values. So if an asset was going to be sold off in their perspective, it does get sold off and shows you what that value is. The minimum required is simply their proportion of the estate multiplied by their bid or by their point of view. And then the value per share here is, of course, normalizing that one more time like the matrix would show. Here you can see what they've been assigned. This is the name of the asset, the percent allocated. It's going to be 100% in some of those large real property pieces, but can be percentages if it is a divisible asset, such as a limited partner interest in a family business or something of that nature. Sometimes we recommend that the majority of the business be wrapped up into one piece that isn't divisible so that people are able to bid on the larger share of things. The good faith estimate is, of course, what you expect that to be valued at. If you were to sell consumer to consumer, the effective sales price is more or less if you just wanted to take it to a dealership, drop off the vehicle, and walk out with cash. They're probably going to give you a lower value. That's also going to be true of businesses, houses, and furniture, whatever it may be. And then finally, you have the other beneficiaries' names and the estate name followed by their bids and what they value at. And each one of these has a heading. So beneficiary one, this is their subjective value. and you can see if they were assigned it or not. You're also able to see this excluding cash and debt and a total value. That comes in play when people are adding external cash for buying out the family home or the family business. This particular one does not have anything to show you. The subjective share received is going to be 33.7, achievement of 122.26% of the minimum required. So that's about 22.26% better than if they were handling this estate without siblings or without other parties that would take pieces that they didn't want and needed to sell. Beneficiary 2, again, their view on things, minimum required value per 1%, what they have received, those IRAs, their subjective value, as well as the with cash and debt and total value. And finally, for the third person as well, same story. Let's get down into the pre-solver audit trail. This one's really helpful in terms of understanding what's happening within the estate. You want to look for if a house was sold because maybe it's too large to be assigned to a particular individual, or if there were any things redone because it was a poorly allocated asset, and maybe we go back through and say that it's sold and we have cash to distribute instead. In this case, it is quite straightforward. There is no debt to pay off, and the judge's solver is skipped because it is already fairly split, and we're able to say the solver run successfully. Let's take a look at a more complicated one now and see what that audit trail looks like, as I do think it is important to understand when there are difficulties. So we'll take a look at how it sells is an estate I've done in the past that does some iteration work in terms of going through things with these beneficiaries. It's a farm. They wanted to keep it in the family, but of course they did have to decide on what to sell off. But one of the things to look for is it'll list off the assets and any debt. So here's your debts. Are we able to solve is the question that this is listing here. And you can see it was infeasible, which is then triggering the process of trying to sell an asset. Now, you should know that each one of these assets that it's trying to sell are starting with low demand across the parties, meaning that they are barely willing to pay more than what this will sell for, or at least it's one of the lowest items and maybe one of the lowest dollar amounts or lowest premiums on one of those assets. So we've tried selling the fishing pond in this case. It's not going to work out. You can see that here. The fishing pond is then reverted back to the system, and we're trying out soybeans. It's a higher value item, as you can see over on the right with a little description. And we can see as we scroll down if it was feasible. It was not, so the asset has been reverted back. And now we are trying both the soybeans and the fishing pond to see if selling those two lots will take care of business. Unfortunately, it hasn't, and so now we're trying a ranch. This is a cattle ranch. Once again, it's a higher value asset. So we're going to try just selling that one asset before adding it on to the prior ones with lower demand to see if we can't keep those within the family before just adding on a whole nother piece of land. It wasn't feasible, so now we've gone ahead and added that fishing pond once more. It isn't feasible yet again. We're trying the soybeans, still not working out. And what do you know, when we do the ranch, the fishing pond, and the soybeans, we do get a feasibility where it's able to pay off these debts, medical bills, and keep things that are needed. This was a pretty neat estate where we're able to still see beneficiaries get what they needed. The son who was assigned the tractor still gets the tractor and has really emphasized the corn and keeps those lots The daughter in the middle really enjoyed the family home and was able to keep that. And the youngest was actually able to keep their camera equipment. For whatever reason, it's sentimental to them. And yeah, so there is an algorithm in there that's reading the demand on each one of those assets and then trying out different iterations in terms of what should be sold and how do we try those different combinations to sell as few things as possible and then maximize the value on the output. So hopefully that helps describe a little bit on how to read the executor report. Super helpful for administration and explaining how we got to this solution, particularly pointing out that different combinations of these assets were attempted to be sold before we just came up to something. You can, of course, always point to the actual bids on each one of these assets to determine, say, hey, there wasn't a lot here. That's why we went with this. If you ever needed to, you could really just pre-allocate something if everyone was upset about its sale and try it again. So the solver will always work around whatever you've decided to withhold. So that is important. And I know people will enjoy the fact that you can create good answers for them quickly, and presumably the family will be quite happy with the solution as it does keep the most in-demand items and generates enough liquidity for them to meet the liabilities that the estate may have. So that's all for now, and I hope to speak with you again soon.